Our second reading this morning comes from the Song of Solomon, also known as the Song of Songs, chapter 2, verses 10 through 13, and chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. My beloved speaks and says to me, "Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. For now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth its figs, and the vines are in blossom, they give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away." And from chapter 8, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If one offered for love all the wealth of one's house, it would be utterly scorned. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. A few years ago, I lost quite a few hours of my life, which I can never get back, reading the Twilight series. For those of you who managed to avoid this craze, let me explain. Twilight is a series of young adult novels, which was then made into movies, about a teenager named Bella, who falls head over heels in love with Edward. Edward has skin as smooth as porcelain and golden eyes that sparkle and sweet, sweet breath. I know, it's totally ridiculous, and it would be totally unpalatable if there wasn't a delicious twist. You see, Edward's good looks aren't just genetic. Edward is so exquisitely beautiful because he is an immortal vampire. But wait, he's a good vampire. Instead of drinking human blood, he makes do with animal blood and has chosen to live peacefully among humans. This all works pretty well until Edward meets Bella and they fall in love. As I'm sure you can imagine, being in love with a vampire is complicated. For one thing, Edward has superhuman strength and speed and must be very careful not to unintentionally hurt his mere mortal of a girlfriend. And Bella has an unfortunate tendency to clumsiness. And of course, whenever one of her falls or something that she breaks causes her to bleed, it's not easy to be in love with a vampire. But then Bella figures out what has to happen. Edward needs to bite her without killing her and turn her into an immortal vampire. Then they can live happily ever after, together, forever. But young love is never that easy because Edward objects vehemently to this plan. He wants Bella to remain sweet and innocent rather than turning into an unpredictable beast constantly tempted to take the lives of human beings. He explains to her again and again the dangers and challenges of being a good vampire, but she refuses to listen. All she sees is the promise and possibility of being with her true love until the end of time. Twilight, The Fault in Our Stars, Romeo and Juliet, Tristan and Isolde, Ross and Rachel. The best love stories are the ones where something, circumstances, families, even death, keeps apart two people that we know should be together forever. There is something deliciously appealing about the quest for love. Few poets have captured this quest more eloquently than the writer of the Song of Songs. There is no getting around the fact that the Song of Songs is a book of love poetry, sometimes unabashedly erotic. It seems out of place in the Bible, in part because it never once mentions God. For centuries, theologians have argued about whether this book should be in the Bible at all. One Jewish text tells of a great debate at the end of the first century when rabbis were deciding which books would be in the canon and which would not. Song of Songs just barely made the cut. This book has been typically interpreted in one of two ways. Either it is simply what it appears to be, a secular celebration of human love that ended up in the Bible by a happy mistake, or an allegory describing in very human terms the sublime love that exists between God and God's chosen people. The truth is probably not so much either or, but both and. Yes, this is a book of the Bible that is about the passion and physical intimacy of young lovers. But because it is in the Bible, it offers us a beautiful and profound reminder that one of the greatest gifts God has given us is the gift of our bodies. But you could only call the Song of Songs a secular book if you overlook its many biblical references and allusions. This is easy enough to miss, especially when we're reading in translation, but many of the Hebrew words chosen by the poet clearly allude to other books in the Hebrew Bible, to the creation of human beings in Genesis, to the Psalms, to the laws that God gave the Israelites to guide them in their relationships with one another. And with these allusions, the Song of Songs puts God right in the center of our embodied lives and suggests that our experiences of romantic love have something to teach us about our love for God and God's love for us. And in the Song of Songs, as in many of the most enduring love stories, the thrill and frustration of love is in the longing and seeking of one lover for another. Throughout the book, we see these two lovers searching for one another, running through streets, asking, "Has anyone seen my love?" This is a story of searching and longing. One of the love stories that has endured for centuries because it so perfectly captures the thrill of the chase is the story of King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, recently popularized again in the book and then the television series Wolf Hall. In this fictionalized account of a true story, we meet King Henry as a frustrated young man. His wife, Catherine of Aragon, to whom he was married as a very young teenager after her first husband, his brother, died, has failed to produce a male heir to the throne. It's quite clear that besides that, Henry has had a wandering eye for quite some time. He's fathered more than one child with his wife's ladies-in-waiting and has recently become besotted with a woman named Anne Boleyn. But unlike Henry's other mistresses, Anne resists Henry's attempts to seduce her. She does not want to just be another mistress. She wants something more. And her refusal to give in to Henry's advances has the effect of fanning the flames of his passion. In the course of the story, and in a process that takes years, Henry finally secures an annulment for his marriage to Catherine so that he can marry Anne. When they're finally married and Anne has become pregnant, she says to one of Henry's advisors, "I was always desired, but now I'm valued, you see, and that's different." In the Song of Songs, we might think that these two lovers only desire each other, only search for each other so that they can consummate their relationship. But if we read more closely, we find that they keep referring to each other with a Hebrew word that implies a covenantal relationship, the same kind of relationship God establishes with God's people. The Song of Songs is depicting a long-term relationship defined by mutuality and respect. This is not just a passionate fling. The relationship in this poem and God's relationship with humanity and with each one of us is a relationship not just based on desire, but on value. God values each one of us enough that God pursues us like a lover, intent on finding and claiming us, no matter where we have gone or what we have done. God calls to us. God seeks us out. God invites us into relationship. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. God's call to us is always an invitation, and God's invitation is always open, waiting for us to respond. I'm sure all of us who drive a car have had the experience of driving home from a familiar place, maybe work or the grocery store we go to regularly, only to find ourselves at home with absolutely no memory of the drive itself. Scientists call this highway hypnosis, but even though they've named it, they still haven't figured out exactly what happens during these episodes. What they have discovered is that driving is what's called an overlearned activity. Once we've done it enough, we can generally do it so well that we don't have to pay very close attention. So we do other things while we drive. We talk on the phone or to someone in the car. We listen to the radio. We eat. We drink. Driving isn't the only overlearned activity to which we rarely give our full attention. Relationships, especially with those closest to us, can often be the first casualties of our attention when we get busy or stressed or simply bored and restless. Every relationship falls into patterns, some good, others relentlessly destructive. We find ourselves responding briskly to an innocent question, or yelling at the kids, or checking our phones when our partner is talking to us. Relationships get overlearned. They get stale, even, and perhaps especially, our relationship with God. I imagine few of us heard these words today from the Song of Songs or the story Anne read earlier about a woman who lavishly and physically poured out her love on Jesus, or the exquisite words from George Herbert in our musical offerings today. I imagine few of us heard those and recalled a time when we fell passionately in love with God. For most of us, our love for God is a comfortable, gratitude-based, occasionally acknowledged reality. It's all too easy for this love to become an overlearned emotion, something we give a fraction of our attention to, like that familiar drive home. But as Ursula Le Guin once wrote, love doesn't just sit there like a stone. It has to be made like bread, remade all the time, made new. And our love for God is no exception. Fortunately, God's invitation to us is always open. God is always inviting us in. It is an invitation to remake our love anew, to rediscover that there is more to this relationship than just going through the motions. The reason young love inspires such passion and longing is because if it didn't hijack the rational parts of our brains, we would never, in a million years, allow ourselves to become so vulnerable with another person. And that vulnerability, that willingness to give our whole selves away, is a crucial ingredient to a life of faith. As mystics throughout the centuries have discovered, God's invitation is always open, but our relationship with God enters a whole new realm when we not only respond to that invitation, but when we extend an invitation of our own to invite God into our lives and into our hearts. Extending that invitation can take the form of simply acknowledging God's presence in your life, not just on Sundays, but every single day. Or it can be offering 2 minutes of your morning or evening to God in prayer or just in silence. It could even just be coming forward today and taking part in this feast, acknowledging that you need this nourishment Christ offers. As Richard Rohr writes, communion is presence encountering presence, mutuality, vulnerability. There's nothing to prove, protect, or sell. It feels so empty, naked, and harmless that all you can do is be present. Communion is telling us that God is the food, and all we have to do is provide the hunger. Somehow we have to make sure that each day we are hungry, that there's room inside of us for another presence. If you are filled with your own opinions, righteousness, superiority, or sufficiency, you are a world unto yourself, and there is no room for another. Our only ticket or prerequisite for coming to this table is hunger. At times, our relationship with God can seem like a bad teenage love story, filled with passionate longing and obstacles that seemingly cannot be overcome. Other times, it can seem like a great love story gone stale, defined by overlearned behaviors and destructive patterns. Song of Songs reminds us that if we are willing to admit the hunger and passion for God that grips us all, God is ready and waiting, inviting us in, responding to our invitation, ready to enter into a relationship where we are infinitely loved and valued exactly as we are. And if we're not ready to admit our hunger, that's okay too. God's love surrounds us and fills us and claims us before we ever respond. It is a love as strong as death, a love, in fact, stronger than death, a love we do not have to earn, a love that nothing on heaven or on earth can destroy. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If one offered for love all the wealth of one's house, it would be utterly scorned. You are invited. We are all invited. Let us join God in this feast of love. Amen.